Aloha Aquascaping World, this is Stephen Chong from Stevescapes wishing you a happy new year. It's 2020 people, January, so I hope the viewers of this channel are starting to get their ideas together and start getting their hands on rock and wood, putting together hardscape for the upcoming contest season of 2020. Now, today I want to bring you a video that I've been meaning to do for a while, which is to talk about my top picks from the CIPS contest in November, on-site contest. For those who don't know, the China International Pet Show is the biggest aquarium show in Asia. And the contest, there's an international photo contest that had over 1,000 participants. If you placed in the top 100 and were number one from your country, you were invited to Shanghai to participate in a 6-hour on-site contest. This year I went representing Japan, and this is the layout that I did. I made myself a flying phoenix out of wood. I hope you guys can see it. The wings and the head and body flying over the valley. So I'm not actually going to talk about this layout today. I want to do a separate video going into my thoughts and my thought process in working on site at CIPS. Today I want to talk about my top picks from the contest itself. So let's get right into it. Third place from Stevescapes, I have Michael Adamek from Poland. Now, you can tell that this is a very powerful and very easy to understand diorama layout. It's actually, very similar to the Grand Prize layout 2014 IAPLC from Gregor Olinsky from France. You got the two sides that, wait, let me get some color. What's a purple? That's an easy one to see. No purple in Aquascapes. So, right, so we got the basic two-side convex structure leading to a viewpoint in the middle, while Walensky brought the middle ground up high and sloped it in from both sides. It's still the basic idea. You got two massive canyons on either side leading into a viewpoint in the middle, and Michael's done a really good job in giving us more intrigue, details in the view in the middle view space to pull us deeper and deeper into the aquascape. All the other parts of the layout work together as well with what's going on. So no problems here. It's easy to understand, it's dynamic, it's intense, and it's incredible that he was able to build up to the top of the aquascape in the short amount of time. See guys, within the 6 hours, to bring up your hardscape all the way to the top here and not be afraid that it's going to fall. Well, Michael is a veteran of the contest, and his experience is really showing through here. There is a massive time constraint, and being able to put everything together and construct it this well in a limited time frame is very impressive. If I had to give some critique on the work, I think that well, I do feel like the layout comes off a bit squarey, just because going from top to bottom, you see some straight lines and flat faces. That's my feeling anyway. Let me get on another layer so that, let's see, I can easily delete anything that I draw. But because you have the corner and the line going down here, and the corner and the edge of this side coming down as well, and the relative, usually guys, if you want to have more movement in your aquascape, it's better. Let me get a different color. It's kind of hard to see against yellow actually, but usually guys, if you want to get more movement in your foreground, you want that won't work. How about red? Just a bright red. So there is some indent and coming back and indent and coming back, but it would be good if he could have been even more aggressive, like this, right? So since there's the connection of the rock here to the one here, to the one here, to the one here, you see there's relatively even spacing in the foreground, which can come across as a bit flat. And up here on the top too, mostly it's a sloping line, right? But these are not as aggressively sloped as they could be. And it is because he built up high and kind of came down. But I think that overall, first glance, if you squint, the impression, your eyes can often read it as like a straight line coming across. So overall, there's a bit of rectangulishness here that could have been avoided. Um, maybe one of the biggest issues here, and Michael is aware of it too, is that this stone is too flat. Um, if you were to see this, and if you were to see this aquascape from above, like just pretend, guys, that this is the aquascape from above. This stone here is placed kind of like this stone here is placed like this, right? Ideally, you would want the stone to be placed more like this, so that it's not facing at the same angle as the glass. You want this triangular shape against the glass, which will give you the sense of depth. And also, I think that this flat bottom here that kind of connects to the flat bottom here makes this whole block feel like one rectangle, where that's something that we want to avoid. Um, just to give you guys an idea, I'll do some quick sketching. Like imagine if let's see. So this is kind of what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to go for. Like so there's more opening in the middle. Let's see here. So that this line let's see here. So that so that the space in the middle can really zig and zag and come back up. Or that you can feel a strong line coming down this way from deep in the center to front right. This will make a more natural balance. And actually what's really important about taking out the big rock that he had here originally, I mean, we both understand its potential structural benefits, especially given the limited time frame, but Michael himself knows that that stone there is kind of problematic. And so like when you take it out and you have a bit of emptiness here, what happens is that this right side feels way bigger than it would have otherwise, because you have this indent, right? That stone there kind of takes away from the scale of this one. You have just little tiny rocks over here in contrast, then the structure on the right feels massive. The other unfortunate thing, and this is partially due to time constraints, but I mean, given that Michael built it all the way to the top, he should have taken just one extra step and brought it all the way up and out. Doing this, you don't the momentum of the aquascape, the power of the aquascape doesn't just end, um, because if you want to build it up and out like this, because if you see otherwise, if it feels like this right side has just, I mean, it feels like what he had originally just stops because it is obeying the scale and curve of the aquarium. Never obey like what you sense are the limits of the aquarium. Instead, guys, build all the way out. Um, when we draw too, my art teachers used to always tell me, never get confined by the canvas of the paper, run off the paper. That's the only way to get the size and scale that you want to make a really powerful dynamic impression. And that's also what you need to do in order to not be held within the box, to get outside the box, right? And actually in on-site layout too, in an on-site contest where you're able to use space above the aquarium, I think it's even a better idea to go ahead and just build up and out. Building up and out, even when you even when it's when you build up and out, even if you do confine it, even for your contest photos, guys, where sorry, let me undo that cropping. I want to crop. So even in your contest photos, even in your contest photo, guys, where let's see, wait, unconstrained, undo. What did I do now? Even in your contest photo, guys, where you know that your layout is going to end at the surface of the water, build up and out of the water. If you can, if you have this space in your house where you can keep going up and out of the water or in or around the aquascape, don't feel like only the space in the glass box, only the space that's going to be viewed by the camera when you take the photo is space that you can use. Because if you feel like you're bringing your escape all the way out, you can see, regardless of whether or not there is, um, you can see the space above the aquascape. The fact that you built up and out of it meant that there feels like there's continuation inside of it. That this rock really does go up and out because it actually does. I mean, if you have like wood and you want like more space above the aquarium to make it easy to work, yeah, go ahead and cut it off at the top if you can. But when you're building the initial hardscape, don't feel like you have to obey the surface level of the water, because it's really going to reflect that you were locked into that mindset in the final photo. You can see just by adding a little bit more here and taking out this one rock, the impression of the aquascape is totally different. That said, all of the works, I mean, the guys who were assembled for the on-site contest are all incredible aquascapers in their own right, and there are the real issues of time constraints. The fact that Michael could build it up as high as he did, like this, it's a reflection of his skill and his experience being a veteran of the on-site contests in China. And um, definitely one of my top picks. This is incredible work, and and definitely my third highest pick from the contest. So moving on, my next is Patrick Nemeth from Hungary. Um, Again, you're going to keep hearing similar things from me, guys, as we go through these, because these guys, as top aquascapers, have something that most of the people in the hobby don't, which is the ability to really commit to strong and powerful design elements. They're not weak. They're not half measures. They can go all out. Um, Patrick is known for some of his really great forestscapes. I actually met him in 2018 when he came for the Nature Aquarium party. He had done an aquascape recreating Yakushima, which is an ancient and very wet forest in Japan. Really incredibly beautiful place, by the way, if you have the chance to go. It's kind of out there, but being the forest that has the most rain and also the inspiration for Hayao Miyazaki's Mononoke Hime, it's an incredible place. But Patrick really likes his forests, and again, he did a powerful and dynamic forest here. I really like how natural some of the expression of roots feels, but most importantly, guys, are these like really strong and no fear, no weakness. Just like really power. Let me get the brush back. Really powerful and committed lines, right? Strong, powerful, committed lines that, um, I mean, take a look at most of the wood layouts that you'll see by casual hobbyists, and you'll always find that everything is too small in the frame. You'd be surprised at how big a piece of wood you need to make a real strong line and impression when you create the base structure of an aquascape like this. So, you know, Patrick's skill is shown here in these, powerful, well-built, and natural lines. Like the whole aquascape is like very impressive because of his commitment and his um, sense of balance. Now, okay, let me review one more time. The things that are really good about this aquascape are the powerful dynamic lines, the overall structure, and then the ability to lead, similar to Michael's layout actually, lead to the middle and have something interesting to show the viewer and suck them in. Now, if I had to get into a bit of constructive criticism, and this again really has to do with time constraints. You'll notice, guys, that all of these pieces of wood, while they're beautifully shaped and beautifully placed, they haven't become trees. Trees have branches, right? Trees have roots that feel like roots. We're missing roots here. We're missing branches overall. So um, when you try to use wood, you really have to think about what is the original reference and what is the thing you're trying to create. A dead piece of driftwood in a stream is a very different thing from a living tree. And when you make living trees, you have to commit to expressing them completely. Now, I know that Patrick is very good at this because I've seen his completed forescapes where he had actual time. So he definitely knows that, this is not the way that trees grow. It, trunks don't come up into a point like this. This is this piece of driftwood here on the right would look incredible if it was laid out like this or in a similar position, and meant to be shown as driftwood being pushed by a stream or inside of a pond or a lake. Dead wood. It's not completed if they're trees. In order to make them trees, you know, you would have to make root structures that make sense. Um, you would have to create branches. Sorry, that highlighter circle got right. So you'd have to create branches that look like branches, right? Um, you'd have to so basically, yes. You'd have to complete them as trees, and if you didn't feel like you had the time to complete the trees as trees, I would have actually suggested a theme that doesn't require that type of detail work, like a piece of driftwood in a stream. And then I think the other thing that really stands out is the overall lack of planting. Again, that might have been a time constraint, but we want a little bit more wetness, a little bit more wabi-sabi, a little bit more detail work in small plant groups throughout. Um, Overall, it does feel a little bit bare, especially if trying to create the story of a forest. Also, this is not necessarily a bad thing, guys. In fact, I definitely recommend that you all be like Patrick and able to, break the rules. But the placement of wood here is not really orthodox. Usually in a diorama style layout, you want to have big and thick up in front, right? And you want to have um, thin and delicate, and you want to have thin and delicate in back in order to get, the sense of depth, right? From big in the foreground to smaller and thinner in the background. This is um, the opposite. Instead, there are medium, smallish trees in the foreground, and that can actually work, especially with this type of detail root work in the foreground that makes it feel like you're seeing just the small base of bigger trees. Um, but anyway, more medium, small sized woodwork in the front, and then a huge, large tree in the back, midground. Um, that can actually work very well. My reference point would be some aquascapes by Ron Wenlin, who's another participant in these on-site contests. I'm going to talk about his layout later, but he's known for some of his forest aquascapes entered into the IAPLC that just had big, massive tree in the midground. Like more massive than this, like massive tree in the midground, and then some other smaller trees on either side that framed it and directed the overall layout. And you can see like this balance is interesting, right? It works. But if you want to do that, the thing that is absolutely necessary is that the tree in the center really have that sense of being a tree and feeling massive. So like when Ron did it, he had like a huge tree in the middle, but you also saw the tiny little roots and tiny little branches and very detailed, minute work overall this center tree. So you could feel like it's not just one big hunk of wood, but there's a sense of massive scale. It's truly dynamic, gigantic, epic tree. Maybe like the ones from the Totoro movie. Um, and this is like I feel like if anything, if the woodwork around the edges might have been a little bit more detailed, and if um you know this tree in the middle had been able to build out more, Patrick probably would have been able to get the scale. He's definitely not afraid of using big pieces, and he's definitely got that capability. But again, this is time constraint. If you might have noticed that my description of what I'd want the tree in the middle to look like probably requires a lot of detail work and a lot of filling in to make sure that you've really completed that image of a tree, where many of these trees, as I mentioned before, are lacking the branches and root work in order to become trees. So those are the main critiques, but as you can tell, guys, like, um, this is a very powerful woodwork, and it really shows Patrick's experience, sense of balance, sense of composition, and his commitment to strong elements that comes with the experience and skill that he brings. So this brings me to my third and final pick from the CIPS on-site contest, Shaquiel's Forescape, Shaquiel from Malaysia. This work, man, especially considering the limited time frame, really shows off his skills. I reminded again why looking at Josh and Shaq's work, um, those two layouters from Malaysia really give me the sense that they have the most similar sense for the art to Tokyo Aquascaping Union. Looking at this layout, the balance between strong and dynamic, subtle and detailed, and importance of overall composition, I feel the most kinship, the most familiarity. This is the type of layout that Fukada-san would like to do, that I would like to do, the type of layout that we value highly. Now, let's get into some of how this all works together. It's powerful, dynamic, but also clear, easy to understand, and sucks you in as an overall journey from start to finish for an aquascape. It's important, guys, that um, Shaq is able to have continuity between foreground and background. You see the same type of elements, wood and planting, in the foreground as in the background, and yet they are in a different space. Um, so like this is one type of space that we have in the foreground, big and bold and coming in, generally speaking. And then there's another type of space that he's created in the background with draping roots and the viewpoint. You can tell because it's on a higher plane, right, compared to the foreground. This is the overall balance of the aquascape, but you can see that there's like two clear types of spaces, the strong and powerful foreground elements that are also being very effective, I might mention, at attracting you into the back. Like they're framing the space in the center that Shaq wants your eye to see. And this piece of wood here that also leads you in, excellent composition. But at the same time, there's this extra type of space um, that's connected from left to right via the vertical draping roots that if you have the same type of element in two spaces like this, you can feel like there's continuity between them. And this is the same strategy that Fukada-san used in his Mighty Cave layout, where let me do a quick bit of sketching. Where, Fukada-san had these big, powerful stone elements that came down to the center, made a viewpoint here, and went on to the right side. But what was really important in tying that aquascape together was that there was a slope of HC. Let's see, there was a slope of bright stone and HC that led all the way from the left side down into the middle, and that open space of HC in the background was the final viewpoint, the feeling of freeness and peace that Karasan wanted to bring you to after going through these powerful and strong dynamic foreground elements. Shaq's layout here is similarly structured in that sense that the balance between the world he's created in front and the world he's created in back, and the fact that he has the skill to manipulate driftwood in order to create that clear delineation, even though there are harmonious elements foreground to background. There's some continuity. There's continuity, but there isn't. There's continuity in content, but there is strong distinction in structure. Um, and this is a type of skill that is not exactly easy to develop. Um, Also, this woodwork in the middle I mentioned, it's really something special to have like these, very subtle bits of empty space amongst the hanging roots, and it makes you feel like the forest goes on. There's more forest beyond the forest. This is really what you want to accomplish in your viewpoint center area of experience. And the fact that it has some repetition with the left side, but this bit of white space here that makes a clear break from it isn't perfectly continuous. Um, that's also a key in making sure that you do bring your audience to a final destination. Now, if I had to make some critiques of the overall layout, and man, any critiques I'm going to make of this are going to be very, very minimal. First of all, I think that Shaq could have gone for some better looking stones. Um, I know we had what we got, but like, and the focus of this is wood, guys. You don't want the stone to be so powerful and speaking up for itself that it fights with the wood. But at the same time, like this face could have been a little bit more attractive. Shaq knows that he could have used some stone that was a little bit more handsome. But this is a personal taste difference. You know, I'm sure that he really didn't want the stone to be fighting against the wood. I just don't like this round one right here that feels different from this, for instance. You want to have continuity between this rock and this rock, but man, these are tiny, manini, no matter issues. The other correction, and Shaq is also aware of this too, is the size of the Anubius is too big. Um, he also thinks there should have been some smaller ones to use, and thing is, guys, like, if you look at Shaq's actual contest layouts, like, he's so good at using small, subtle detail plants in order to, give scale to the even bigger scale to the overall structure and also a sense of place for a layout. So this use of, kind of bigger, too big Anubias that makes the wood feel a little bit smaller than it should. Is a bit out of character for him, but it still works. Like the overall balance of the planting is still very natural and harmonious, and so that also is a more minor correction, especially when so many of the aquascapes, especially my aquascape, were clearly, um, you know, unprepared planting wise, and I had to, especially when you work so much on the hardscape structure and you have a limited time to figure out. I was really, panicking for time to um, get my plants even into the tank so that it wouldn't look completely barren. And you also saw Pat's layout before this, so it's good enough. It's more than good enough. The, and finally, I think, and this is really a matter of taste, but um, in order to create this mid ground area that Shaq did, to me it works and it works for me, but um I think in order to completely secure this as the true midpoint of the aquascape, like I would err on the side of more open than more closed. And what I mean by that is, in creating this midground, the placement of this piece of wood, the placement of these roots, Shaq is making a decision, a calculated decision, fighting against two undesirable outcomes, and I'll speak to those now with some layering that I did before. On one hand, if you move the piece too far to the left, then you completely block it off. And as I mentioned, there's complete and perfect continuity with the roots on the right. And so now you really don't get a sense that you don't get the same sense that this is the viewpoint, that this is where your eye wants to go and that you can be sucked into it, right? So that's one thing that you want to avoid. The other thing that is, on the other hand, if you make it too open, right? You pull it to the right, and you have too much white space. Now it's just blank. Now you have like this flat white area that doesn't work well with the left one, and it doesn't feel like there's more forest beyond. It just feels like there's blank white. But getting this piece right, considering those two negative outcomes, I think that it is very important to, secure for the viewer that this is where the eye needs to go, that the open space is beyond here. And when you take that into consideration, it would be better to err on the side of more open, too open than too close. To that end, see, I think that I would go for something about this. Like, just put a little bit tiny bit to the right and maybe have a few more small, subtle hanging roots in order to make sure that you have the connectivity. But I would want to make this space here in the middle just a little bit more open in order to guarantee that for the viewer, yes, this is where your eye is supposed to lead to. Now, uh, those are my top three picks from the CIPS onsite contest. And this is kind of interesting, but probably people who have been paying attention to the results will notice that none of these three layouts were the top three picks from the judges themselves. And that has to do for a few reasons. One of them being that the judges have to think about the overall presentation on site. In other words, water clarity. In other words, how naturally planted the plants look, as opposed to I'm only thinking about where they are and whether if they're the right size, and I'm imagining how they would look in the final aquascape because that is what's more relevant to the aquascapes that we have at homes, the aquascapes that we would enter into a photo contest. But for the judges there, they were judging based on effectiveness of presentation on site. So they have to think about what the aquascape looks like at different angles. They have to look at water clarity. They have to look at the balance of the plants, not as they will be, but as they are right now. And in that sense, with Shaq's case, his aquascape was still very muddled. Um, he didn't get the water clarity that other aquascapes did by the end, and I think that probably detracted. So I do want to spend time. I think it's worth going through the top three aquascapes from the contest itself because they are also, these are works from top layouters, and they're also definitely aquascapes to talk about. So first who is um, Yimyo Namucha, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that totally wrong. Apologies, dude, but aquascape from Thailand. Yimyo is another great aquascape. He actually placed one rank above me in the IPLC, so I got to get him back next year. But this was ranked 3 amongst the on-site contests judged by the aquascapes, in the results from the judges. This was ranked 3rd. And let's see. So from my perspective, obviously it's a strong convex structure. Again, bring the eye to the viewpoint. It's very well and easily compositioned in that sense. Also, as I mentioned several times with the other aquascapers, he has an ability to make strong, committed lines that is very enviable and something that every aquascaper of any skill level should try to commit to learning. But where this layout docked points from me, I mentioned in Shaq's layout how important it is to have continuity of elements in Aquascape in order to make sure that it feels like you're in the same space. There's not an unnatural break between worlds. Like you don't have a flower garden in back when you have a cliff rock face in front. And for me, I think the break between Yimyo's foreground and background is a little bit too striking, a little bit too harsh, unnatural. Like the fact that there's no wood at all in the background and the types of plants that are seen in the background are totally different from what's in the foreground. It just doesn't feel realistic. I don't get, um, I guess the idea could be that the viewer is inside the wood, and beyond the trees that are surrounding you, there is more forest beyond, right? That could be a concept that works. But I would still want to see some little twigs and branches to express that, this is the forest continuing. I would still want to see some continuity in the types of plants, assuming that, we're living in the same world. And, these kinds of um, I guess, are they Java ferns or some other, grass-like sharp-leaved plant? They don't help to build up the illusion of a faraway forest. And so, um, in Japanese, we would say, not deny it, or it hasn't become what you want it to be. I think like the background doesn't feel like a natural continuation of the foreground, and that's why this layout was not amongst my top three, even though I really, really respect Yimio's skills. So the next layout, rank two, um, Hugo Liao from Taiwan. He also did really well this year, the Taiwanese contest as well as the IPLC, and in the CIPS. And I really appreciate Hugo's, strong, powerful rock work as a structure, accenting. It's a plat. Hugo is very good at making powerful dragonstone structures that are the platform to present, beautiful and colorful plant work. And in that sense, this is just a continuation of his other layouts. Where I wasn't quite feeling this aquascape, at least not against the three that I picked as my top three, that I felt like it was a little bit too predictable. It's good to have strong committed lines, and that's something that you see as a continuing theme for me to be talking about, because that skill is really important and it is, you know, somewhat rare. It's hard. It's something that beginner layouters really need to pick up. So, Hugo, obviously, all of these rocks are very strong, powerful elements, all of them very well committed. But the fact that all of them are the same from left to right weakens all of them overall. If you have too much uniformity, then even the commitment that you create loses its impact. So, well, there's impact, and then there's also a sense of natural balance. Like when Hugo asked me about my opinion in this layout, I think for the Japanese style Iwagumi, we want that sense of natural imbalance, and in that sense, there has to be some breakage of this uniformity. And the way I would do it is I would take this rock out, this one here. You take this out, and in fact, what I would even do is I would want something that's a totally different angle. Like if I, for instance, made a rock that's facing like this, and then maybe make some smaller ones here. And then maybe like even another um, flat one in back like this. So um, what this does is here, like that. So what this does here is um, this space now drags your eye in, right? And there is a sense of openness that the layout didn't have before. Maybe even make this smaller, because we really want to make this space as strong as it can. You need something to suck the viewer in, and like I'm just trying, guys. I'm just trying to build up the sense that there's do something with the balance of the aquascape. Um, give the viewer motivation to be pulled farther and back. Yeah, something like that. Um, so we have to effectively use negative space. And I guess wait. See, I don't like how squarish this looks now. So I guess but I mean, I think that this rock could continue. Like you might see a little bit more of, and then like not perfectly black, but a little bit lighter. It's like goes. Yeah, that's more poetic, maybe. So, um, you want to have the sense that there's openness. You want a break in the uniformity, and you want to be able to suck the viewer in. I think this small correction to the front foreground would be something that's doable. Otherwise, even any of the rocks on this side, like if you just break them, if you just change the direction of one, if you just like even if you have good placement, if you have uniformity of angle, then you don't have a sense of natural chaos. This layout is more, in its original form, is more abstract. It's a little bit more artificial, and maybe that's what Hugo is really going for. But maybe it's my bias as someone who's trained mostly in Japan and has an affinity for the Japanese style of iwagumi. I would like to see this type of breakup, this type of imbalance, in order to create a natural balance. Okay, so that's my opinion on second place, Hugo Liao, and we're going to finally move on to first place from the CIPS onsite contest, Ron Wenlin from China. And I mentioned him when I was talking about Patrick because this guy is legendary. Look, if you look through some of his old scapes, there's like incredible works of like the giant epic trees or incredibly giant epic waterfalls. His layouts always feel so spacious, and the best ones have just incredible impact and incredible clarity of message. So this is an aquascaper that I respect very highly for his incredible works. Um, Getting into this layout, if you look at each individual stone, you can see his skill, the handsomeness of the faces that he picks for the stone, but also their placement. It just each one feels natural and each one feels strong and powerful. There are no weak elements here, but in the overall composition, when you look at the bigger view, this is not the best example of his skill in terms of composition. Um, like first of all, I mentioned a bit of squariness in Michael's layout. This is much more squarey here, uh, and it's not filling the whole screen. It's a square that's just kind of down here. When you look at the elements overall, now if this shadow was stronger and more triangular, like then that obviously breaks up the squareness a bit. And it does. Maybe the judges didn't feel it to the same degree as I did, but I don't feel like this is enough. The darkness is like only, to me, the dark part of the layout is only this one little patch of it here in the center. And then otherwise, all of it is light, the same, the same brightness from left to right, top to bottom. And it's all kind of arranged in this rectangular shape that doesn't, like, individually the stones are all angled and all natural feeling, like there's a lot of triangles within the individual stones, but if the overall composition um doesn't feel angular, it doesn't feel natural, and it feels more squarish, that's a compositional problem for me. The other thing is, I'm not quite sure where I'm supposed to look. You can see that in every aquascape I've shown you up until this point, from the top three of my picks to even number two and number one, number two and number three amongst the judges' picks, there was someplace obvious that where your eye was supposed to be led to, and in that sense, um, there's a sense of composition that is, um, how should I say, a strong intention in viewer experience. Your eye doesn't get lost, so your eye feels much more attracted to that layout. Yeah, and mine too. I guess the bird itself would be the thing that I'm trying to attract you to. But I feel like in Ron Wenlin's layout, um, this I guess is supposed to be where we're supposed to go, but the sand path up and back, um, like for instance, it's just so flat, right? If there were strong cliff angles that brought us into that, it might feel different. But this flat line, on top, that brings, it doesn't feel like a natural it doesn't feel like a natural endpoint, and so that's problematic. There's also the fact that this sand experience doesn't really have anything to do with anything except the foreground, and so there's no, I mean, I guess this right part of this rock here is hinting at it, but it's not sand, right? It's rock. So there's no sense that the foreground connects to the background. There's no sense that this little bit of white here has anything to do with the rest of the layout. If anything, it would be better if, that, if anything, this aquascape would be stronger if none of that was here. If it was just, this, and if I guess this was supposed to be the anchor. Right now, I'm not really sure. This bottom part's supposed to be the visual anchor, or is this top part supposed to be the visual anchor? And the two are fighting each other, right? So, like, the way I would fix this is I would make continuity between the background and the foreground. Like, I mean, there's any number of ways you could do it, but I'm just like quickly outlining the way I would do it. Maybe you have this. This is why story is important, guys. If you have a story, then you'll think about how to use that story to fix the problems of your aquascape. Like, for instance, let's say that the story is that the audience is in this powerful open pool or cliff area after a stream has trickled down. We see a stream trickling down the mountain, and then it comes down a waterfall into the rapids. So then, that gives us like the story of what's supposed to happen. Like maybe we have a bit of cliff over here. We have a big cliff face up here. Finally, we see, the waterfall. We get the hint that there's a little bit of white waterfall running down side. It's like disappearing behind some mountains, but it comes back. Then we see it fall down the side of the mountain, then rejoin. Let's see, and then it rejoins the cliff face, and then you see the continuity between the waterfall and then the rock work that's going to be down here. Like, this is one way you could connect the background story with the foreground story while giving more well, maybe say contextualizing what, like, otherwise I didn't really know what, like, we have this dark black shadow in the middle that he made, but it's like, for what? Like, the question becomes, what is that, right? What is that shadow? How is it contextualized in the overall space? Then what I've done here is say, okay, that shadow is a cave, and it's one of many caves that are being created by this cliff face, and the cliff face is kind of carved away by time with a waterfall running through the middle of it. And the waterfall, the stream that we see up in back, and again, I just really don't like this flat space. Gotta be maybe more rock face or something like this, right? Then you see little bits of plants in between. So then you have some context. The water coming down the mountain falls into a waterfall, and it connects to the foreground. So then this viewpoint makes more sense because it's contextualized by what's going on in the foreground. And there's some continuity between background and foreground. There's also strong, powerful elements that frame the piece and make it clear where you want the eye to look. There's no fighting between, let's say, this area here and the shadow down here for what is the main viewpoint. those are the types of fixes that I think would be needed to do in order to bring this to the type of compositional excellence that we see even in Ron's um, contest level entries. So those are my opinions on the top three from um okay, so yeah, guys, this sum is going to summarize my comments on the CIPS on-site contest from Shanghai. I gave you guys my views on the top three aquascapes for my own personal pick, as well as my personal feelings about the top three that the judges picked. So keeping in mind that all of these layouters are amazing, and the judges themselves are also incredible individuals who are having to judge these works from a different type of criteria than what most competition aquascapers think about most of the time. The way I think about my layouts most of the time, and what I think you guys should think about when making aquascapes at home, even casually. I hope that this lecture brought you guys some insights, and I'm looking forward to bringing you more content in 2020. Even as we start getting ready, it's about to get serious, guys. It's January. So from here until about March is when we do the major work to create the hardscape that will really determine, the quality of the layouts that we'll be submitting to the IPLC and the CIPS, as well as the Taiwanese ISTA. So good luck in 2020, guys. I hope that I was able to bring you a bit of insight that will give you some good luck, and everyone, work hard, and I'll see you at the contest in 2020.